Hi everyone, my name is Kelvin Augustine. I'm a solicitor and a registered migration agent, number 1686660, with my colleague Jorge Gamba with us today as well. And we will be touching briefly on the changes that are coming in a couple of weeks' time, which is regarding the 491 and 494 visas specifically. And at the end, I'll also be touching a little bit about the proposed partner visa law changes that were supposed to come into effect in April, but it has not come into effect, but might be coming into effect sometime early next year. All right. What do you think about the changes that are coming, especially with the 491 and 494?
I think they're very positive changes. They are going to allow a lot of people who don't have a clear pathway to PR to access PR via a regional area with occupations that are currently not available on the 189, like your marketing specialists, your advertising specialists, a lot of occupations in agriculture, occupations in finance, occupations in some of the technicians, science technicians and that. So very positive changes, lots going on. Tell us a little bit about the 491 changes.
Yeah, I've actually heard that there's have been allocated just specifically for this 491 visa, and since 491 is replacing the 489, there's also been some changes in regards to the regional areas. So what they've done is that they've actually separated a regional center and a regional area. So two of the most important changes, I believe, would be Perth and Gold Coast. So Perth and Gold Coast are now classified as regional centers. What that means is, especially if you're a student and if you study there, you will be eligible for a 3-year graduate visa from November 2020. I think that's one of the big changes.
That's fantastic. That's great for a lot of people who want to extend their stay after the student visa,
Yes.
buy some time, get the points up, get the English up, get the NATI, get the professional year, get some work experience. That's going to be a game changer for a lot of international students.
Definitely. And I think with the 491, there's also a list of occupations that are yet to be released. I don't believe it's released yet. But
we're publishing all the changes post 16th of November when the official visas come into effect. And supposedly after the 16th of November, let's say that you're eligible and that you receive an invitation, the earliest you could apply for PR on those visas would be on the 16th of November 2022.
Yes, and the other visa subclass that's also going to be released is the 494. So the 494 is actually replacing the old 187 visa, which is the employer-sponsored regional visa. So it's replacing the 187. Now, the 494 is not a PR visa, but after being on it for 3 years, you will actually be eligible to apply for permanent residency, and that's where the new 191 permanent residency visa comes in. So with the 494, one of the big highlights is that there are some exemptions with regards to age and skills. And before coming in, with regards to the age, I think there's some categories. For example, academic applicants, medical practitioners, and also 482/457 holders who are already on 457 and 482 visas. They would be eligible for an exemption. So basically they can be above 45 depending on
them meeting the Fair Work High Income Threshold, which at the moment is around $145,000 per year. So if you're on a 457 or 482 and you're over 45 and you've earned for 3 years in a row whilst you are on a 457 or 482, $145,000 for 3 years, you can access PR even if you are above the age of 45. And I've actually done a couple of applications like this. So they work, and this exemption will be available as well in the regional visas.
And the other thing is that New Zealand citizens on a 444 special category visa and 461 visa holders will also, they're actually not required to have a skills assessment done, nor do they have to show work experience to be eligible for the 494. Whereas previously on the 187, for people who are on a 444 or 461, they would need to show a skills assessment and a minimum work experience. So that's some of the highlights with regards to the new 494 as well.
And that's an important point, because this happened also on the 189 last year. The government allowed New Zealanders to get onto the 189. So when we're talking about the points in general, 189, 190, and now the 491, well, 3 years ago we could have got an invitation with 60 points. Now you need 80 and 90 points in some occupations. Why is that? Well, that's because the government allowed New Zealanders to get onto these visas, which means that there's more competition. New Zealanders don't have to do skills assessment or points. They have sort of a disproportional advantage over a lot of applicants.
It's more like an express entry, isn't it?
Correct. So it makes it quite hard. So nowadays, if you needed 60 before, now you need 80. Which makes it harder. You need to be more competitive. You need to do everything you can to go up on the points. Sometimes it may not be enough. You might be on a 485 visa, and you might need to extend your stay on a student visa to buy some time, which is something that we get asked quite a bit. Sometimes clients don't reach the points level whilst on a 485.
And some of the ways you can actually increase your points while waiting. We've got a lot of clients and potential clients that are actually stuck at 65, 70, 75, and they come in daily, asking us, how do we increase the points? What's the best, points to be at? So, now just for your information, so some of the areas that we can, look into to increase your points. One of the main areas is actually called NATI, so it's the accredited translators course that you can actually sit for the test, and then if you are accredited in a community language, you will be eligible for 5 extra points. So that is one way to increase your points. And the other way is from November 16th, actually, if you're single, you actually get 10 extra points. So I think that a lot of us have already heard about this by now, where they get 10 extra points, and even if you're married, you actually get
10 points as well. So what the government's trying to do is trying to prevent the 2-for-1s. So when we receive an applicant and they're highly skilled, Australia wins. But if they bring someone with them who doesn't have skills, who doesn't speak English, then they're going to require a lot of assistance, a lot of social security help. So what the government's trying to do is saying, well, if you're single, we win because we get you and you've got a lot of skills. But if you have a partner, let's say a de facto partner or married, then we want to know about that person. If that person can speak English, at least at the level of PT 50 on each round, or IELTS 6, then they can give you back 5 points. And if that person can get a skills assessment in an occupation in demand, then that person also gives you 5 points. So you're at the same level with single people. You won't be disadvantaged. The only way you'll be disadvantaged is that if your partner doesn't speak English at level IELTS 6 or doesn't have skills assessment, then you'll be below the single people. Yeah. Even if you've done the same studies and then you're relatively at the same points, they will be above you, which will why a lot of our clients are delaying getting that.
And the other thing is the masters, where you can actually complete your masters for 2 years in a regional area. Give you 5 extra points, just for studying a master's in a regional area. But one thing we've got to remember, that you will not be eligible for a graduate visa 485 twice. So once you've used the 485, that's it. So you can't actually have it 2 times. So if you do a master's in a regional area after your 485, you won't be eligible for the 485, but you will be eligible for the extra points there. You get extra 5 points there, and that increases your whole overall score.
So we got the Gold Coast, Perth, Canberra as well coming on 491, Geelong, Wagga, Bendigo, Ballarat, the whole state of South Australia, Tasmania, the Northern Territory, and basically anywhere outside of Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney, because the government's identified that people don't need an incentive to come to these 3 cities. They come by themselves. So one way to spread immigration evenly throughout Australia is to incentivize the growth in regional areas. And Perth and Gold Coast did a very smart move to become regional again, because that's going to attract a lot of international students, people who know that the point system is quite competitive, and any edge they can get over others studying in Melbourne and Sydney, then they will go to those areas. And the extra years on the 485 it's a real bonus.
It's brilliant from November,
Yeah.
2020, so that's going to be really good.
But one thing to note is so we have a lot of clients as well on 476 visas, the skilled graduate visas, the engineers. If you have held one of them, and even if you study a master's in the regional area, you won't get the TR because you cannot get a 45 if you've held a 476 in the past. So that's one thing to be mindful. You will get the regional points, but you won't get the extra 45 visa. So another aspect is on the employee's
Which is the new.
what are some of the eligibility requirements?
So with the new 494, I believe you've got to have very similar requirements to the 187. But the main highlights, as I said, is the exemptions to it. With the age and with the English and things like that. Now the main requirement, I believe, would be the 3 years working experience with the 187.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, the 187 previously before March 2018, you didn't need any experience. You could actually have gone straight from diploma of hospitality to be sponsored on a 187 as a chef in a regional area through a sponsor. But then they changed that requirement in March 2018 to 3 years. That requirement is going to stay on the 494, but my expectation is that at some point that may be relaxed to try to incentivize regional area growth, because the 3 years on a post-qualification experience is very tough to meet if you, say for example, are on a student visa, you've done certificate 3 and 4 commercial cookery, diploma hospitality management, then you have a year and a half where you can gain some experience, but then how do you make up the next 1.5 years? It's going to be tough. You might need to extend on a student visa because you wouldn't even meet the requirement for a 42.
That's true.
So at some point, I believe that may be relaxed. We'll have to keep an eye out.
Definitely, I think closer to the date where it's been released, post November 16, there will be that we'll be posting, on our page, and we'll also be going live at different sessions closer to the date and even after it. Now, I encourage you to send in your questions, and we will both endeavor to answer as many questions as possible today. And if we can't do it while we're on live, then we'll do it after the session. But please send us your questions, and we'll definitely endeavor to answer them.
We've got a question from Majid saying, what about computer networking at 85 points after November? Any chance to get invitation? I think very good chance. I mean, right now is at 80 points. So if you, Majid, if you're single, then you'll be 10 points ahead of what you are right now. And at the moment you need 80. So if you're projecting to have 85, then I think you're a really good candidate. I think you should be already in the system. If you haven't got your skills assessment, you should definitely endeavor to do so. Because ACS changed the guidelines a few weeks ago. ACS, before you didn't need to provide any financial evidence, any payment evidence, but now ACS changed the guidelines in 2 different areas. Now you have to produce 2 forms of payment evidence from each employer that you're claiming experience for. But also, if you're doing a recognition of prior learning with ACS, let's say for example that you didn't go to university, but you have worked for the last 8 years in software engineering, then ACS will say to you, show me a recognition of prior learning, show me 3 essays, and if they discover that these essays have been plagiarized in any way, they'll ban you for 12 months, just like Engineers Australia. So very important changes. Now you need financial evidence of payment from the companies that previously employed you, which for some people who worked, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, that's very hard nowadays.
Yeah.
Because those bank records and tax records, might be gone. So I encourage you all to approach one of our offices, talk to one of the agents, and let us guide you on those skills assessment, because each time they're becoming more and more complex.
Yeah. And there's somebody is just asking us about the 494 and when it's going to be released in. The last I heard, I believe it was going to be sometime in November 28th. I think that was what I've gathered. So just hold on, and I believe at the end of this month, a lot of things will come off clearer. Most of the states would have released their list, occupation list, and then we would be much clearer with all the different occupations with the different states. Now, what's the other
one other thing as well to note with the 494 and the 491s is, well, specifically the 491s, is that the states themselves have filters. Now, in the 489, the states had very similar filters to what they did on the 190s. For example, the Northern Territory, they asked if you have been living in another state, then you need to show that you have employment prospects in the Northern Territory, and then you've been working there for 6 months.
If you have already been resident in Australia, you need to have at least 6 months of residency in Northern Territory before you're eligible to apply, for 489, for example. So you need to be resident and working there for at least 6 months before you're eligible to apply. So there are some states that have residency requirements, especially for applicants who are already onshore. They require you to actually be resident and working there before you can be eligible to apply for those visas. New South Wales is one of the exceptions.
Correct.
You actually don't need residency
in some cases,
unless,
right?
Yes.
So if your occupation is overly subscribed, like accountant, like mechanic, engineer, like, well, most types of engineers, except for like petroleum engineer, which doesn't need a filter. And also in IT, specifically networking, ICT security specialist, software engineer, developer, programmer. You need to have been living in New South Wales for working there for a year.
At least 12 months. That's
now,
right.
Some areas of New South Wales, like Orana, Riverina, Southern Inland, Murray, far north coast, far south coast, those areas didn't have residency requirements, and you could have applied. And we have a lot of clients who applied from other states to those areas. My expectation is that those areas will come back again at some point after the 491 starts. I believe
will come in, I think, a couple of months' time. It should come back fresh. And
New South Wales did say that applicants shouldn't prioritize 491 New South Wales just yet, because they were thinking of bringing the program closer to 2020. So if you have an eye out, keeping an eye out for Orana or your Southern Inland or those areas in New South Wales which didn't have residency requirements, then you may need to wait a little bit longer. Again, we will publish the full guidelines, the full details as we get the Department of Home Affairs and as we get updates from the New South Wales Department as well.
Yeah, with the New South Wales, really quite a number of trade occupations actually that do not have this additional criteria placed on them. So without the additional criteria, what it means is you can select to apply for a residency visa in New South Wales without even being there, without even being resident there. So we've got to look out for occupations that do not have additional criteria placed on them at this stage. For example, it goes with the same thing. There's no additional criteria placed on them at the moment, and occupations such as psychologists.
Hi guys, we disconnected a little bit just for a couple of moments, but we're back. So to answer your questions,
yes,
and just refresh the page.
No, it's going to be John
right.
Martin.
John Martin, currently on 45 and finishing in Feb 2020. I am a nurse with 60 points for 189 and 65 190. Any chance of getting an invite in Victoria State? John, if you have graduated from Victoria, then registered with APRA, you have good chances of being accepted onto the Victoria State sponsorship program. If you live in another state, then you need to get a job offer from a Victorian to access the 190 Victoria. Nurses have a residency requirement and a work requirement of 1 year. Candidate for the 190, but definitely for the 189, you need at least 80 as of today.
No, I've got another question. I think we've answered.
Let's go up.
Pompey. So you've asked that whether an old student, a previous student, would get an additional working year. So I'm assuming you would be referring to the 485, which has an additional year. Now that is scheduled to take effect from November 2020. So if you are applying for the 485 from November 2020, then you would be eligible for that extra year, depending on where you have studied. And we need to take the current meta.
Okay, Karen Mehta, 45 is finishing soon. I've got a skills assessment as an accountant. I've done an MBA degree in Australia. I'm working as a course consultant full-time in Adelaide. What are my chances? Possibly good chances if you're a high-performing graduate in South Australia. We have had a lot of clients who with 65 points get invitations from South Australia State. Apart from that, accountants, if you've got an offshore degree or if you're living in another state, then you need 3 years experience as an accountant in Adelaide. So you need to look at how much experience you have and how much experience you need to accrue in order to gain eligibility as an accountant. Otherwise, as a high-performing graduate, depending on how you went on sponsorship options in South Australia.
There's a very interesting question here from Akshay Kapoor. So I believe the question about accountants sitting on 80 and 85 points have actually been there for some time now. You know, what do we do? We're stuck at 75, we're stuck at 80, 85. Is that enough? Now, the trend has been, especially in the last year or so, it's always been 90.
Yep.
It was 85, I believe, mid last year, and then it actually went up to 90. And the only trend we see is that it's going up. It's 90 and above. But with the state nominations, there's always different ways, like you said, Orana, New South Wales. There's so many different options. But if we're talking about just sitting at 80, 85 and waiting for a 189, that might have a slightly lower chance overall.
We've seen clients with 75 points in New South Wales accountants getting invited.
State nomination, that's right. So
but they had to have 1 year experience in New South Wales as accountants.
Residency, exactly.
And with accountants, you know that there's a differentiation between bookkeeper, accounts clerk, and accountants. Accountants, they project financial forecasts, they lodge the bars, they advise on taxation matters, whereas the clerks and the bookkeepers just make sure the books are balanced and everybody get paid. So important differences there. The best thing to do if you're concerned about your experience and whether it meets the criteria and whether it fits within the UNSCO definition is to get the Skills Assessment Authority on your experience. Now, this doesn't happen for architects because the ARCA for architects doesn't do this, but most other skills assessment bodies like your Engineers Australia, your CPAs, ACS, they do this service. So if you're concerned about whether your experience meets the criteria for the points, then you can go to the skills assessment body. We can help you, check the letters to ensure that they are compliant, and then you can go to the skills assessment authority and get it double checked. Because the last thing you want is to go up to immigration and say, "Here's my experience. I think it meets the requirement," and then immigration will say, "Well, that's a different unit code."
Definitely. Now, there's a few more questions here, but I think what we're going to do is we'll just move on to the partner visa proposed changes. Now, keep your questions coming and we'll endeavor to answer them after the session. But what we'll do for now is we'll just move on. I just want to touch briefly on the proposed partner law changes. Now, if a partner who is an Australian citizen or a permanent resident, so you would be most probably looking at the 820 onshore partner visa. Now, all this while, the onshore partner visa can be applied for by someone who has been in a de facto relationship or is a married couple, and they would be eligible to apply for it. And it's one application put in as a visa application. It involves the sponsorship application and the visa application together. Now, what they have proposed to do is to change it into two separate applications where the sponsor puts in a sponsorship application separately. Once that is processed and decided, only then can the visa applicant be eligible to actually put in a visa application. So the reason behind that, the whole logic behind that is it's always been the practice for people on student visas, temporary visas to come into Australia, having the Australian partner here, being with them, for about 6 months, 8 months, whatever, get registered, whether it's marriage or as a de facto couple, and then straight away apply for a onshore partner visa, and that would give them the bridging visa straight away. So they don't actually have to leave the country. They get a bridging visa, which gives them rights, Medicare rights, working rights, everything. So, one of the things that the department wants to stop moving forward is, applicants who have this in mind, just to come, 3 months, 4 months relationship and being eligible to apply for a long-term partner visa. So these new laws will actually stop them. Now, when it's going to be coming in, we don't know. Specifically, we don't know, but it was supposed to come in April, May this year, and that was actually postponed. That was actually delayed.
Yep.
So we don't know when, but our advice is, if you're eligible now, you've got an Australian citizen or permanent resident partner, and you're eligible, you're married, you've registered your de facto relationship, feel free to look into this seriously, to apply for the 820 while you can, and while it's easy to apply. So that's what would be our advice on that.
And part of the reason why this is coming as well, Calvin, is because of domestic violence provisions.
Yes, that's another big
So
one.
they want to ensure that the sponsoring person, the Australian, doesn't have a criminal record or a substantial criminal record, and puts the other person who is sponsored at risk.
So one of the
that's one of the reasons why. So they'll have to be cleared of any domestic violence offences before they can become sponsors. So if, for example, you have someone who is your sponsoring partner, they're a resident, they're an Australian citizen, then when this new law comes into place, then they'll first need to be cleared of any domestic violence offences. And then once this process happens, which could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months, then you can apply. So if your visa is running out and you're thinking, well, I'm going to apply for a partner visa, if this law comes into effect before you apply, this could potentially delay you and make you actually extend your stay
have to
through
go back.
another visa.
So
Some important changes that are coming along. They're supposed to do in May. They're supposed to happen again in October this year.
I think it's going to be.
I think it's going to happen next year sometime.
Early
next
to mid
year.
next year.
Yeah.
That's right. Great.
More questions?
Just a couple more questions. The Orana.
Yeah. So Orana, we expect them to open post 16 November. The government said that people shouldn't be thinking of those areas as the first priority, because they may they may open again post January 2020, which would mean that if you have to apply for Orana, you may be disappointed if in November, December, they may open up again in January. Another one. Okay, what about go up here. So, employee sponsorships. How long do I have to work to get PR?
So it depends. If it's 482, if it's to employ, the requirement would be you having at least 2 years of minimum, working experience in a closely related area to the nominated occupation. So, you can have 2 years of working experience anywhere in the world that you can evidence, and that would be one of the most important, the core criteria for the 482. Now, with the 187 and now being replaced with the 494, that's 3 years working experience right there. And then of course you've got the different exemptions of the different categories. So that's to answer, your question, Pratibha.
And how can you go from a 482 to PR? There's two different channels, the 186 TRT and the 186 direct entry. You need to have at least 3 years experience for the 186, and on the TRT you need to have at least 3 years experience with that company. Any other questions? All right, so
Graduate Masters in Accounting from Canberra. Do you recommend within guidance and opportunity close to ACT this last 2 years?
yeah, accounting is ACT. Some occupations require you to have PhD in the ACT. I would wait until the guidelines are published before making any full decisions about your future, because one thing to note about the Northern Territory is that you got to be working there for 6 months in your nominated occupation before you can apply. But as we know, the Northern Territory is a bit smaller than Canberra. The labour market there may be more restricted and it may be more competitive, so you might find it harder to find a job in your field.
Okay. I think we'll...
Yeah. Okay, what's the new rule for chef, and what do we do after JRP finish? For the JRP, you need to do certificate 3, 4 in commercial cookery, which we're going to take you about a year and a half, and then you need to do a diploma of hospitality, which will take you 6 months. That all up is 2 years. During those 2 years, you need to work 360 hours as a chef, paid hours, which equates to around 20 hours a week for about 4.5 months. And then you will lodge a provisional skills assessment with TRA. Now, after you lodge your provisional skills assessment, you can apply for a 45 visa. This 45 visa will last 18 months. And during the first 12 months of this 45 visa, you need to do step 2, 3, 4,
which is what involves 1750 hours, 1,750 hours,
1,725 hours,
25 hours within
which is around 30 hours a week. Now, one of the key things to remember with trade courses is that, let's say you're on a 45 and you want to do a trade course because you want to hedge your bets. Well, some of the best trade courses to do are mechanic, painting, carpentry. But doing chef on a 45 could be a little bit risky because the certificate 3 and 4 will take around a year and a half. And then you need to do a year's worth of experience. This combined is 2.5 years. But your TR is usually 2 years, which means you wouldn't have enough time at the end to get your 1,725 hours as a chef, which could be a little bit risky for some clients. So better come and see us before you make any decisions about doing any chef studies while on TR. But if you have a student visa and you're studying certificate 3, 4 and diploma of hospitality management, and then you're going for your GRP, chef has a lot of options, has a lot of regional options. So it's one of the best occupations to study in Australia because chef is not only has a lot of options in the point system, but also has a lot of employment opportunities in Australia because the tourism industry here is so wide. So if you're studying chef, you're on a good pathway.
I think we'll answer that after the session.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
So we've got more questions coming in, but we don't. What we'll do is after the session we'll sit down and answer some of you personally, and hopefully that would help. Now we'll have another live session very soon again. So we have that nearly every week, and we encourage you to tune in to the latest updates, especially after the November 16th updates that are coming in. So feel free to do that. Ask us questions. Feel free to contact us. And we'll keep in contact and we'll keep you updated.
Thanks very much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.